My name is Clara Towson, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
I am Francisca George, and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Susan Leemans and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom. Yeah.
My name is Zainab Samaz and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hey guys, my name is Sasha Vickery and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hi, my name is Lloyd Harris and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Jan Faria and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Yes.
Take one. Well done.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Paolini and I'm a friend of the show.
Wow, Jasmine, you got it in one time.
Ready? Play.
Hi. So Jake, I'm glad that you were waiting for the stream all day. Hope you're not going to be disappointed that it's just me. Of course, in the title you have ATP Weekly French Open Preview, but that doesn't mean that we don't talk about the other events that finished today. I think we definitely have to give them like 5 or 10 minutes. And of course, the big story today was Novak Djokovic claiming his 100th title over Hubert Hurkacz in Geneva. It was close to not panning out for Nole. Of course, he played Geneva in 2024 as well. He lost in semi-finals back then. We didn't really know what his motivation towards the event was going to be. I think it was clear when he played Mahaj last year that he was in a bit of a weird state in the semi-finals. Nothing like that this time. He was fighting. It wasn't pretty sometimes, definitely not. But all in all, I do believe he obviously played extremely well in the breakers. And that's kind of how he got this one done. I mean, Novak was, more clutch than Hurkacz when it came to the crunch. He was 2-4 down in the third set. So that was already a moment where he easily can lose that match. Easily. But that's not what happened, obviously. And in the breakers, he just targeted the Hurkacz forehand like he would always do in this matchup, pretty much, right? That was kind of the goal. And the returns obviously were much better than in any other part of the match, really. I believe in the third set tiebreak, there was this one at 2-3 maybe, where Hurkacz hits a massive serve. And it's just not enough. Novak still hits a topspin return off it. There's no block. There's nothing you can potentially attack. Every single point suddenly, even though the entire match, Djokovic was not doing much on return. He was playing Hurkacz in pretty quick conditions. Even though that was the case, in this particular moment, every single thing has to be won off the ground by Hurkacz, and that's going to be an issue for the poll for the most part. And what else? Does this change our opinion on Novak going into Roland Garros at all? We're going to look at the draw, soon, basically. That's going to be most of this episode. Myself, I don't think I've really changed my opinion about Novak whatsoever. It's a good run for him. He clearly felt like he needed to play Geneva. Getting that milestone in is definitely nice because it seems like he made it a big target. 100 is a good round number. Of course, it's 3 more till Federer, 9 more till Connors. Novak is the kind of crazy guy who might just say, "Oh, I want to chase Jimmy now," and then he probably makes it because basically whatever Novak puts his mind to, he can do, seemingly. But I don't know if it was the most important thing in his mind, but to get it done is probably quite good too. But if we're talking about his long-term chances at the Slam, I don't think this result this week impacts my opinion that much. He's still in the mix of contenders, but I don't think he moved up because of this run. I think if he just straight up shows up at Roland Garros either without it or I don't know, let's say losing in the final to Hurkacz, probably not that big a difference for me. And Hurkacz obviously had a very nice run, but what we saw at the end in terms of his emotional state, kind of how sad he was about losing this one, that's going to be something that we have to monitor as well, right? Just kind of, it seemed like it really hurt him. So I don't know if he can recover mentally, physically in a couple of days. We'll see. And well, not to spoil much, but he has a very difficult opening round draw, and at least a very, well, difficult maybe isn't even the right word, but at least a very like high profile draw in the opening round at the French. And as I said, we're not really going to be focusing on these tournaments today, but I also want to mention, of course, that the ATP 500 in Hamburg, which was eventually picked up by Flavio Cobolli. And Cobolli, well, he defeated Andrei Rublev today in the final. To be honest with you, I wasn't quite expecting it. I felt like during the whole week, like the overall level of Rublev was just much more stable. But this was a little bit like the Montreal run last year, I suppose, then from Andrei's perspective, in the sense that, like, you know, the whole week he was making good progress, and then he kind of like backtracks it in the final. I don't know if Ghosty will be here today, but he obviously must be very happy right now as a big enjoyer of Cobolli's game and somebody who's been telling us that, well, we are sleeping on the guy. In terms of like him going into Roland Garros, again, I don't think it really changes much because he's facing Cilic, and I think he would have been the favorite anyway against Marin. And then there's like Arnaldi, there's Zverev in that section, but maybe it will be quite interesting. Zverev obviously was also one of the big stories in this tournament, and him losing quite early, also having an illness. You know, it's not really a good sign ahead of Roland Garros. I think that it's pretty obvious that Zverev was also trying to catch some last-minute momentum at this event, and at that he probably failed. If that was the goal, you know, I don't think he really got what he wanted. But yeah, Rublev obviously was also one of the players who was desperate for a big run. And he kind of got it, but in the end, the final wasn't that promising either. So yeah, not really sure how this puts him, like in terms of his mental state ahead of Roland Garros. It's still going to be more important, I think, the kind of draw that he has, rather than whether he won Hamburg or not. But yeah, for Cobolli, it's definitely a good title run. He's actually just the third player this season to win multiple ATP Tour titles after Carlos and Felix. Also the second one to do it on clay after Carlos. Yeah, it would be amazing to translate it into a Roland Garros run. And worth mentioning as well that, you know, at first this season, we were talking about some pretty horrible form for Cobolli. And that was like, what, 2-8 on hard courts after winning the first two matches. And now he's 11-4 on clay, 12-4 on clay, something like that. So definitely since the clay season began, he's been much more dangerous. Oh, apparently Rublev had some sort of stomach issue. Okay, yeah, I didn't hear that actually, but it's very possible. I honestly barely watched the Hamburg final. Geneva though was really good, I think. So yeah, that's more or less it. I mean, as I said, usually on ATP Weekly we focus more on these events, but it's kind of different when we are talking about a Grand Slam draw, and that's basically the main goal of why we are here today. So in fact, that's what I'm going to have for you on the screen in a moment, and we are just going to, well, analyze it and try to make some light predictions maybe as well. Of course, we have already said a lot about like the state of favorites going into Roland Garros and how that works more or less. Let me enlarge this. This is definitely not enough. Well, I guess we're going to go by 16s then. Now it's good. I guess it's okay. Yeah, so obviously Yannick Sinner is the top seed, and last year he made the semifinals, even though he was coming into that on, well, not too much momentum, not the best physical shape. Right now, also the momentum has been a little hampered by the fact that he didn't play for 3 months, of course, due to the suspension. But he does seem like a very strong contender after his performance in Rome. Yeah, he lost to Carlos Alcaraz. Yes, some of the match sharpness wasn't fully there, but you can imagine that he's going to be more dangerous in Paris. And, well, soon enough, we might have to say that all the questions, all the doubts regarding the natural surfaces form of Yannick Sinner might be just going away. especially grass, I think he's just going to be deadly on. And here he's clearly the top two favorite in my, a top two favorite in my book. After Rome, you can't really put him up first, I don't think. But he is much closer to Alcaraz than he is to Zverev or Djokovic or whoever you have in that number 3 spot, basically. Gene is filling out his bracket tonight. Well, I'm not obviously like on the stream. I'm not gonna fill out the bracket, but I will more or less say who I would have pretty deep. Obviously, Sinner, looking at his opening draws here. I mean, Rinderknecht, that doesn't seem like a big threat this year. Arthur is in a big slump. Even last week when he won a match and then faces Hurkacz in the second round, like doesn't even come close to getting to a tiebreak against the Pole. And then Atman or Gasquet. I mean, obviously, shout out for Richard Gasquet, who is retiring at this event. And, well, he still shows some veteran magic from time to time. Also worth remembering that the Musketeers, the 4 Frenchmen who were just dealing all the shots in French tennis in the last 10, 15 years, they actually all had very good retirement parties so far, right? I mean, Gilles Simon in Paris, the ATP 1000, and then also Tsonga at Roland Garros when he was playing Ruud, and basically was right there with Casper until getting injured, pretty much last game of the match. So yeah, I mean, I think that Gasquet probably is going to show something, but who would be more dangerous to Sinner, Atman or Gasquet? Well, definitely Atman, but it's still not much. So Sinner, I think, drew very, very well in terms of the first 2 rounds. A lot of people will be saying Davidovich Fokina is a potential threat for him, maybe even Lehečka. Lehečka I'd probably buy more if it was a hard court rather than clay. And Davidovich Fokina, well, he was also supposed to be the round 3 opponent for Jannik in Rome, right? And we know what happened there. Got demolished by Jesper de Jong. Well, let's see him get there first. And also Davidovich Fokina against top players, we all know how that goes. So like even when he's competitive, he typically does not have enough to prevail. How many years ago was it that he played Novak here at Roland Garros in like the 3rd round? And it was kind of like the quintessential match of that type where the sets were extremely close, but they were still won by Novak. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he would be able to beat Jannik in the longer format, especially. And the longer format, once more, 2 years ago, thank you, Gene. Best of 5 format just like is so important. Even if you think about a match like Rinderknecht, let's say Arthur wins a set. In the regular event, you would be like, oh wow, upset alert. And in this event, you're just like, nah. I mean, doesn't really matter, right? So anyway, I do like the draw for Sinner in the first 3 rounds, even though some will say Davidovich Fokina. Hello, Brenda. And then 4th round, I guess, is where it could get interesting if it is Arthur Fils, right? Arthur Fils, I know we haven't seen him pull it off at Roland Garros. 2023, he lost to Davidovich Fokina in the opening round. 2024, he lost to Arnaldi in the opening round. But then, of course, Arthur is a player of like immense potential, some very good results this clay season. But his draw is somewhat difficult, I think, to even get to Jannik. And then after that, he never really showed it, like, I don't know, 3 hours straight of insane tennis against the top player at a slam. We haven't seen it yet. He can probably do it. I mean, obviously, the Hamburg final is a good example of that. But at a slam, yeah, Fils has been somewhat unproductive, let's say, at Grand Slam level. So yeah, I'm not really too sold on him potentially beating Jannik, but obviously that's a player who on paper has the potential to do it and is still the toughest possible rival here. Rublev, yeah, sure, he just had a Hamburg run, potentially can get to play Sinner, but I just don't believe he can beat him in many ways, as we've said before. He's like a worse version of Jannik. And Fils, my only concern is that the draw looks pretty difficult. Like it's just filled with some obstacles. We've got Nicolas Jarry in the opening round, who I know is in terrible shape, who lost like a lot of ranking spots, 140-ish. But he is a deadly player when you're facing him early in the event, and someone who's going to dictate and not let you play your game. Or Carabelli or Munar, like that's guaranteed to be a big grind for Fils with whoever prevails in that match, which initially will be a big grind between them, and then one of them will also probably force Fils into something like that. And yeah, then Fils Rublev. I guess it's, obviously Arthur would be a favorite right now, but it's also not that simple. So first of all, let's see if Fils gets to the fourth round, and that will already be, I guess getting to the fourth round will be like the plan minimum for Arthur, and then after that, anything else is a bonus if he plays Sinner, I suppose. But yeah, that's a player who like theoretically could beat Yannick on a good day. I like what Fils said in his pre-tournament presser. He said he has to be locked in from the first round. Yeah, I think if you're like really serious about it, there's a big difference of playing somebody like Karpais Baena, not to be disrespectful to him, in the opening round than it is to play Jari. I mean, you basically know that a lot of the control over the match is not going to be in your hands, and you have to like be ready to handle it. Hopefully Arthur is, because yeah, again, Sinner Fils, that would be a match I really want to watch, whereas the other potential fourth rounders here, I just don't think Sinner would be competitive against these guys, or the other way around, they wouldn't be competitive against him. Let's see who Sinner can play in the quarterfinals. And we've got some interesting names here. It's kind of like the Mr. Consistent type of section, because you've got Draper and De Minaur. De Minaur, obviously, the entire clay season, he's just beating everybody, and not even the clay season, the entire year. He's just beating every player you would expect him to. But as somebody pointed out on one of the last streams, he hasn't beaten a top 10 player in like about a year now. And yeah, I just think it might be a similar event. There definitely are going to be people who will say that De Minaur might lose to Zverev. Laszlo has to be given a lot of respect as a proper clay specialist, very nice weight of shot. Best of 5, I'd still favor Alex, I guess, but it's not obvious. I think he has a much higher chance of losing to Zverev than to Bublik or Duckworth. And yeah, I mean, Draper is the other Mr. Consistent guy here. Somebody who we were kind of doubting ahead of the clay season, thinking only the Madrid conditions will be really good for him. But he performed in Rome as well. I still don't think he has a high chance of like beating Sinner if they meet, for example. But to get to the quarterfinals, like it looks doable, at least. I'm not sold, Gene, but like looking at this draw, I think he gets the third round for sure. And then unless it's Hurkacz, it's probably also the fourth round for him. And then who does he play in the fourth round? Alex De Minaur. Quarters are very doable for Draper. Very interesting players, that are maybe like not looked at that much here. Obviously, Hurkacz Fonseca, well, that's actually looked at a lot. I mean, that's one of the most hyped round one matchups, and for a good reason. I think that seeing what Fonseca did in like Rome or Estoril recently, I can't quite, join the train here and say that he is probably going to win. I think there are better players, there are better seeds for him to play, like Rublev, like Tsitsipas, where he would have like kind of a simple target to attack. Whereas against Hurkacz, it's going to be tough to keep up with the serve. It's going to be tough to keep up with him just like being very consistent and gritty of the ground. I don't really like the matchup for Joao. Again, we have to see how Hurkacz reacts to the Geneva final, both mentally and physically. I think that's really important as well. But I'm not too sold on Fonseca winning this one. However, the good thing for either Hurkacz or Fonseca, even though they have a very difficult opening round draw, Herbert or Bonzi, that seems really nice. So, well, one of them will likely get to play Draper. Obviously, Draper kind of destroyed Fonseca in Indian Wells, whereas Hurkacz Draper on clay, to me, like with Hurkacz right now seemingly back in shape, I don't think it's that far from a 50-50. And also Menchik is here, who kind of was in the similar boat to Draper, right? Winning a Sunshine Double event, lots of doubts regarding slow clay performances. I guess he hasn't been quite as good as Jack, but he's also been pretty solid. I think, though, Menchik's draw is really tough. Miller opening ground, that's already a big banana skin. And then Basilashvili, Menchik was a good match in Australia. I think here it would be even closer because Basilashvili is in such good form right now. So yeah, it's likely to be just another solid effort from De Minaur Draper. If I was going to name a player who's gonna get out of this and make the quarters, I would probably still say Draper. because I like his first 2 rounds, and he's just much more consistent than a lot of these other guys here. But I also think that if we're going like bigger picture and thinking about the fact that the winner of this section will have to play Yannick, I don't think anybody here really will give him a massive challenge. The bigger challenge could be Fils in the 4th round than anybody here to me. And yeah, Menchik Miller, I agree, it's very tough. I was very shocked when I saw the betting odds on that one. It seems like Menchik is a big favorite. Like, to me, that's almost 50-50 on these courts in these conditions. Menchik Miller. Yeah, I think we'll move on. So basically, Yannick to make the semis looks very likely unless we get like a complete peak version of Fils, which at a slam hasn't really happened yet, hasn't materialized, but at some point it probably will. There we have Alexander Zverev, and of course that's already a player we mentioned because of the Hamburg loss, which he blamed on an illness. It was probably the case. I'm not going to say it wasn't. In a way, I also don't think it hurts. Yeah, it is live, Jake. I don't think it also hurts Zverev all that much that he lost in Hamburg, because the whole plan to even compete at this event was flawed from the get-go, probably. But, you have to notice that he's in a very different spot this year entering Roland Garros than he was last year. Because obviously last year, even though, let's say, he wasn't dominating the tour, he had just won Rome. And Sinner and Alcaraz weren't at their best, or at least we were thinking that they probably won't be at their best. Right now, he's also number 3 for me, I think. When we were doing power rankings with John, he was also number 3 for me. But the big problem is that Sinner and Alcaraz are just in another league. Last year it didn't seem like it, and then during the event we kind of found out that they are. Of course, Zverev still went 5 sets with Sinner. Worth mentioning that Zverev also almost lost in the 3rd round, in the 4th round. It wasn't like a bed of roses until he met Alcaraz finally, right? It wasn't like that. I think people tend to forget that it wasn't just like a foregone conclusion that Zverev reaches the final last year at the French. In fact, very far from it. 1-4 in the 5th, 2 breaks down to Talon Kriegspor, and then also Rune was a few points away from beating him. So I think in terms of Zverev, maybe in a way this can help him a little, just like survive some of these early matches. He also has a decent draw in the opening 2 rounds, I would say. Lerner Tien beat him in Acapulco. Just on clay courts, it sounds a lot more, just like a mismatch, really. I think it might be a very long encounter, even if it's just like 3 sets or 4 sets that are theoretically short in terms of the results, the score lines. But obviously Zverev Tien, it will be a grind either way. Yeah, he should have lost to Kriegspor. I agree about that. 1-4 down, 2 breaks in the 5th. I think I've said before that, like, if it's any other surface, Talon wins that match for sure. Because even when he gets so tight, 1 break is enough probably. Like, he's probably gonna use that insurance break and just serve his way to the win. Whereas on clay, it was just impossible. When Talon got so tight, he basically couldn't win points. But anyway, in terms of any potential threats here. So I think the 3rd round, Kobori or Arnaldi, that's the first time that I see Zverev like really struggling. Sorry that I'm like maybe not taking Felix into consideration. I think for Felix to beat Arnaldi and Kobori back to back is a little bit of a stretch. Also, if he gets through, I think it's easier for Zverev to face than either of these young Italian guys. They're both very complete, can attack, can defend, can be just like relentlessly, punishing the fact that Zverev doesn't have like a major attacking weapon for the most part when he's not confident. Can also simply, play some amazing forehand shot making and then win like that too. Yeah, I'm not really sure which one is tougher for Zverev, but I think that might be the first test. And then, of course, there's a big name here at the bottom, which is actually not Grigor Dimitrov, the 16th seed, but it's actually 18th seed, Francisco Cerundolo. And Fran, of course, has been in incredible form. He lost in Hamburg to Jiří Lehečka, which actually might help, let's be honest, because this was also another player where we were like, why are you playing Hamburg? And I think even more so than with Zverev. And Zverev was clearly looking for like some rhythm, confidence. Fran already had all of that. So I think he really should have focused on Roland Garros in the first place, and in the end he did. Well, not for his choice. And well, the last 2 years he reached the fourth round at Roland Garros. But there are problems with this, like the fact that Cerundolo has Diallo in the opening round. Okay, maybe that's acceptable in clay, but Griekspoor round 2, that is just deadly. Cerundolo Griekspoor, anyway, the winner of that match is very likely to play Zverev in the fourth round and just give him a massive test. Cerundolo has already beaten him recently. Griekspoor, well, almost at Roland Garros, almost at Munich, but beat him in Indian Wells. Yeah, I mean, the winner of Cerundolo Griekspoor will be a big ask for Zverev, I think. And because of all the other players in their section, I think it's very likely that one of them gets to the forefront. Because obviously Dimitrov is not the strongest clay court seed. Maybe even Ethan Quinn can beat him. I mean, Ethan played a very good qualifying campaign. Barcelona, Madrid as well. He was firing. Is Arnaldi the favorite to make the third round, as Jean says? I would probably say that. Like, I think I would pick him, but some of that is related to just Koboli coming off Hamburg, right? If that's not the case, maybe I go the other way. I don't know. But I would pick Arnaldi over Felix. Yeah, I think this is one of these matchups where Arnaldi won't have time to like lose his mind, and he'll just play, you know, whatever is most natural for him, the instinctive defensive tennis he was kind of known for before, well, trying to do some other stuff and failing a lot. Anyway, yeah, I mean, Zverev's still probably the most likely to play to make the quarters. But if I was kind of, you know, risking it, let's say, I would maybe go Fran. Or just say the winner of Griekspoor Cerundolo. But Fran Cerundolo to make the quarters here is doable, very, very doable. Griekspoor maybe a little less so, but also possible. There is like a fairy tale element to it, right? I mean, Cerundolo has been so consistent for so long. You're kind of waiting for that one bad loss to happen, really, and maybe it will happen here. We'll see. But for now, I mean, the last 2 years he was in the fourth round at Roland Garros. He definitely will be hoping to at least match that. And yeah, Queen, I agree. I think Queen is very capable of beating Dimitrov here. And then if you beat Dimitrov, you have Shevchenko or Lajovic in the second round. Lajovic and Queen, that's been a saga this clay season, by the way. I think they played in Madrid, then they were supposed to play in Estoril. Ethan withdrew, and then they played in Rome again. So basically they were drawn against each other for 3 consecutive events. And then if they play each other again here in the fourth round, it would be very funny. Anyway, yeah, I think that's enough about this one. I mean, Zverev is the favorite, but Cerundolo or Griekspoor, or even Arnaldi Koboli, there are serious threats that can stop him from making the quarterfinals. And maybe just like last year, he will just need to be ready, you know, in terms of being able to produce under pressure, just like he had to against Griekspoor and Rune last time. And this is the Djokovic section. And let me tell you, even though I said that Geneva doesn't change my opinion about Novak that much, and that I still don't think he's like, I don't know, top 4 contenders or whatever, that I still think that Wimbledon is a better chance. Sorry, yeah, it's getting a bit late. Anyway, that Wimbledon is a slightly better chance just because, like, if the serve is firing, you know, sometimes he might get a little unplayable, and I just don't know if he can survive like a 4-hour grind against Alcaraz or Sinner on a clay court. Anyway, if Novak isn't making the quarters here, then I think he was never making the quarters because, well, maybe you guys can tell me who he's losing to here. Like Ute, maybe that's the biggest threat because Shapovalov doesn't seem in a good spot on clay right now. I think Misolic might actually make the third round. That would be pretty fun. Medvedev, I suppose, but like Djokovic, Medvedev on clay, it's been difficult for Novak sometimes. But first, let's see Medi get there. Although Medi also has a good draw. Maybe Nori opening round is actually the most difficult match he has. But like this quarter is just made for Novak. The problems will start later. Like in the quarterfinals, him playing Zverev or even Cerundolo, that's the match where for the first time this event, I would be like, okay, I don't know if Novak is winning this. I would have to just like see the first week and how it's going for both players and how that situation transpires. So I think that would be kind of like the first moment, because this quarter, or well, yeah, not this quarter, but this part of the quarter, this bottom half of the second quarter, it's kind of made for him. Fairly likely to make the third round, considering Stan in best of 5 play right now is a little weak, and then Humbert also had that injury. Fairly against Medvedev third round, is that difficult? I don't know, tough to say. But yeah, it's just sounds like Djokovic will probably beat everybody here. He has a very easy win in the opening round, it seems, against McDonald, who's like, his win-loss record on clay is terrible over the last few years. Mute, I would like to see against Novak. I don't think he can really win, or at least it would be very difficult for Corentin to do it. But I would like to see it just, for the sake of a very unique matchup, and well, not something that Djokovic hasn't faced before necessarily, as he's played over 1,000 matches. He's faced every player on the planet, more or less. But still, we don't see that every day. So I'd like to see that. But yeah, Novak, great draw. I think his chances of making the quarters have, risen so much since the draw was made. Have his chances of winning the title risen? Maybe a little, because obviously if you're getting to the quarters, yeah. Okay, I'm struggling to find the rest of the draw now. Okay, we will also talk about the Musetti section here. And this one, to me, is pretty good for Lorenzo too. Like right now, of course, the big story is that he is the 8th seed. Because if you remember what happened to Lorenzo in his previous appearances at Roland Garros, there was that Djokovic loss from 2 love up. There was that Tsitsipas loss from 2 love up. One match against Carlos that wasn't close. And then obviously Djokovic Musetti last year was also a marathon. So Musetti was playing all these guys, I think all top 4 seeds, in fact, even 3 of them number 1 seeds. He was playing all these guys before the quarterfinals. So he's beating everybody else in the French. I think his record is like 8-4 or something like that. But he's not beating them. And right now he just gets to avoid them. So that's perfect. I'm not going to say it's a now or never, because he's just too young and too talented for that. But it's definitely an opportunity he hasn't had before. And he's not guaranteed to have it like soon, right? So yeah, after this clay season as well, final in Monte Carlo, semis in Madrid, semis in Rome. Everything seems like lined up for Musetti. In fact, it seems all like so lined up for him to do it that I kind of have this feeling he might disappoint. But I don't know who he would really lose to. Like Navona or Nakashima is a decent test in the third round. And then obviously there's one player here who can easily beat Lorenzo, and that's Holger Rune. But if we're looking at Holger recently and thinking who is more likely, to get to the forefront in the first place, and who is more likely to get there in good physical shape, then Musetti is the clear answer for both. So I guess just like from this being like the starting point of the tournament, if we're looking at Musetti and Rune, we have to think Lorenzo is a slight favorite at the moment. It might change over the course of the week. Holger, when he was healthy this clay season, obviously did great things, Barcelona title included. But yeah, my dream for this section is definitely to get that match at least. Rune, Musetti, fourth round. I think that would be beautiful. I think that would have the potential to be one of the best matches of the event. And that's what I love to see. And of course, with the caveat that both guys have to be in good physical shape, which is especially relevant with Holger, who once more has been like ill recently and stuff like that. So yeah, all in all, it's a good draw for Musetti, I think, especially because if he gets through that potentially tough fourth round against Rune, he will run into somebody from this next section, which I know has already made rounds on Twitter. It has already made rounds as well on the Talking Tennis group chat when the draw came out. To be honest with you, that I wasn't really analyzing the draw too much before recording an episode with Vanch yesterday. And that was more or less the first time I kind of like started looking at it at all, because I was just like so busy with Roland Garros qualifying and also some work with Hamburg. But this is the section I knew even before recording with Vanch yesterday, because Vanch sent it on the group chat on Talking Tennis and asked, like, who is making it out of this? And yeah, I mean, the answer is honestly almost could be anybody. There's a good potential for like an unseeded. There's good potential for an unseeded player here to make the quarters, which would be good for Musetti. There's also potential for just one of the seeded Americans. You know, you've got Tiafoe, Korda, Mikkelsen, Fritz. Why not? Yeah, Gene, I think nobody does, and it's kind of like just a guessing game, because all of these American top seeds, like they're not that good on clay, they're not in form really. There's a few dangerous unseeded guys, Darderi, Comesania. I would probably highlight Medjedovic as well, maybe even Altmaier or Kopshiva, but they have that like pretty difficult spot of being drawn against Fritz early. But nonetheless, Fritz hasn't been in great shape. Loses to Hurkacz in Geneva. I guess it's fine. Loses to Giron in Rome. That was a bit worrying. There was an injury earlier in the clay season. Mikkelsen won Estoril, but then wins 3 games against Jere in Rome. Korda is always a mess, and in fact, I think Darderi should be the favorite over Korda in the opening round. Tiafoe, for the last, well, since the US Open, he's just winning one match at every event and then losing the next. Just like the intensity, the motivation, it's not quite the same as it was during the North American hardcourt swing. If I was gonna make a bracket, I would probably just like say, you know, screw it and go Medjedovic. You guys know I have a lot of faith in him. Do I have a lot of faith in him at this event? Not really. If he was in better rhythm, and also if he had some best of 5 experience that was positive, because he's actually 0-4 in Grand Slam main draws, and obviously not the fittest player on the planet either. Sometimes it was coming, you know, in as like that flaw of why he lost, like Marozsan at the US Open last year. And also, I don't really like the opener. I mean, not just because it's a Polish guy, obviously. It's not just because it's coming Mike Shak, but you know, he's been in good shape this clay season too. The fact that he didn't qualify for Rome and Madrid, I think it's just also a little misleading, because he had that, you know, just Offner who was peaking, Miller who was peaking, then he runs into Diallo as a lucky loser in Madrid, and Diallo obviously goes on to have a big run. Will Medjedovic beat Kamil? I mean, I think it's a very even match. You know, probably not going to end in 3. That's really all I can say right now, because if Hamad had any more form and good best of 5 pedigree, I think I would be saying he probably wins this one. But he doesn't have either of these things, so that to me makes it a bit of a toss-up. But yeah, if I was gonna like do a whole bracket, I would probably just like slam Medjedovic for fun. What I want from this section realistically, and this is nothing against Fritz or Tiafoe, but if we have something like this and everybody is talking about this, you know, just saying, oh, this is the craziest section we've ever seen, one of these players will be a very unexpected quarterfinalist. I just want that unexpected quarterfinalist, you know? Give us Thiago Monteiro in the quarterfinals. Give us Jaime Faria. Give us, I don't know, Juan Manuel Cerundolo in the quarterfinals. Honestly, I could imagine Juanma doing it. I think Faria, Brooksby, yeah, they are probably the outsiders. Yeah, I think both of them are the outsiders. Like, I would be shocked to see Faria or Brooksby in the quarters. But honestly, almost anybody else from here is, well, not that likely, but somewhat possible. And it would just be a shame, I think, if this section ended up with a Tiafoe Fritz 4th round, for example. Like, it would just feel so ordinary. It wouldn't even be ordinary for these guys at the French, but it would be like, why were we talking about this section then, you know, if you know what I mean. But anyway, the fact that this one is so wild and basically can produce something unexpected, that's why I think Musetti has an even better chance to make the semis. Or maybe Rune, if he beats Musetti and he kind of takes over. I think Comesania is among the top unseeded players here to have a chance. And I would say the top 3 is Medjedovic, Comesania, Darderi, not in any given order. In fact, if I was going to order that, I would probably say Darderi, Comesania, Medjedovic. But yeah, I mean, Darderi facing Korda in the opening round, you can interpret it 2 ways. I think he's the slight favorite, but that's still pretty difficult. But yeah, Comesania definitely among the contenders here. And why not? I mean, that would be also a a scenario that I would welcome, right? In terms of my will to see something special here. I think Fran making the quarterfinals here would definitely be special, even though he was so good at Wimbledon and the US Open. But it was kind of different, right? He was just serving well and slicing the ball at Rublev and Humbert, who were making errors. Like here, he would have to play a lot on his own, and he's capable of doing that. I mean, he beat Zverev this year in Rio or Buenos Aires, Rio, right? Anyway, sorry for the yawning. I wasn't expecting that, but apparently I am close to my expiration date today. Anyway, let's move on. We have just 2 more sections to talk about. We'll give some big picture thoughts as well at the end, and then we'll probably be wrapping this up. Anyway, here we have Casper Ruud, who of course has a pretty good streak right now. 2022 final, 2023 final, 2024 semis. It would be kind of, I mean, after this clay season as well, ATP 1000 Madrid title, it would be very disappointing if he didn't make the quarters, or especially like even the 4th round. But because of landing in the Alcaraz quarter, there's a big problem in like trying to repeat that semi-final run at least, right? Either way, Ramos Vinolas, he's retiring this season. I don't think he's going to be a threat to Casper in the opening round. Physically, it just doesn't really click anymore for the Spaniard. But, great effort to make it, even if he was helped by some of the opponents not being too fit. Well, probably not losing to Borges either. Popyrin is an interesting case because I guess technically he does have the peak to compete with Ruud on clay, and he already beat him in Monte Carlo this year. That was, of course, after Casper blew match points, but nonetheless, he did beat him. Best of 5, though, and Casper being probably much more confident right now. I would say that still favors the Norwegian. Can Jacquet beat Borges? I think it's a match where we don't really know much. Like Kirian, I think, has only played 2 top 50 players before. I think he has 2 top 100 wins, and both of them were at one event last year in Salzburg. He just really hasn't played at that level. He does have that kind of game where it's like counter punching, but it's varied, it's crafty. I think it can trouble someone like Nuno. But just like purely on the eye test, without any like samples and without any results to back it up, stats to back it up, I would say probably Nuno is just going to have like too much in the long run in terms of his attacking. But it's very tough to say. Jacquet is just so untested at this level. And yeah, the bottom has Paul. Jean says that Popyrin has an awful record at the French. Yeah, I don't really remember him doing much at this event. Definitely not. So I'm gonna check that now. But I wasn't really aware that it's like this horrible. But obviously, yeah. I mean, just trying to think about some of his performances. I'm not getting much. Let's just say that. Ooh. So he won 1 match in 2019, defeating Humbert. I think that one I actually remember. Yeah. And then after that, nothing. Harris in 2020, Nadal 2021. I mean, he can't be blamed for that. Fonini 22, I guess that's winnable by that point. Karatsev 23, okay. And last year it was Kokinakis in 5. I don't remember that, but that's like one of these Spider-Man battles, right? Kokinakis and Popyrin, like they have a lot of similarities, I think, in terms of especially how they adapt to clay with pretty spinny forehands, trying to defend their backhand corner a little bit more. Pretty similar players, I think. Yeah, I think it's 1-6, Jean, but pretty much what you said. Yeah, sounds like 1-6 to me. But it might be 1-7 right now if he loses to Nishioka. So maybe you're just forecasting the future. Anyway, so the bottom of this one, Khachanov, he's dangerous, but he just lost to Offner. Still, you probably have to look at Tommy Paul in terms of like the biggest threat for Casper Ruud. I think that would be a match that definitely goes like beyond the 3-set mark, beyond the 3-hour mark. It wouldn't be obvious for Casper, but if you're looking at this tournament from Ruud's perspective and after the clay season that he's had, I think quarters is like the must, right? It's what he has to achieve, and after that, it's a bonus. I don't think he's guaranteed necessarily, But yeah, that's kind of how you have to be treating this, I guess, from Ruud's perspective. Of course, that might change as well depending on who is in the quarters. I'm just assuming it will be Carlos. Anyway, yeah, Paul Ruud, it's always a good match. We can always remember the actor. So yeah, I do think it would be a grind. I think they played, was it US Open where they played 5 sets, and for the first 4 it was just so close. And then in the 5th set, Casper like ran away with it, 6-love maybe. But yeah, it definitely doesn't sound like a match that he would be able to just like win easily. Yeah, I was just googling Paul Rudd so that I can show you that. Yeah, US Open 24, was it? Oh wow, my memories are very blurry from the last few years. I was so sure it was like 2022 or something like that. So yeah, I guess that shows you that recent years they don't really come together that easily. No, it was 22. Yeah, it was 22. Okay. Yeah, okay, you just typoed. Okay, never mind. Anyway, yeah, Paul Rudd, that would be a good match. Paul Rudd, by the way, looks a little like Stefano Travaglia. I'm always pushing that theory. Nobody believes me or nobody sees it like I do, but well, what can I say? Anyway, I think we will move on to the last section then. And this is, of course, where we find Carlos Alcaraz, the tournament favorite, best player of the clay season, the best player of the season. I don't think I can say that quite yet, because you have Yannick Sinner winning the Australian Open. But if Carlos wins the French, especially beating Yannick, then I think he would be the best player of the season. Either way, with Rome, he kind of just like maintains the status of, I'm the guy to beat. On clay, typically he seems to be a little bit more creative, a little bit more multi-dimensional than Yannick. Well, not only on clay, but on clay it's the easiest for him to show it. It's the easiest for him to, I don't know, like get into the match, micro-adjust, find a way, problem solve. And yeah, I mean, his form, confidence, mindset, everything seems to be good right now. So I think he's probably just as likely as Yannick to go deep, even though his first few rounds are not quite as easy. Zepieri, 12-0 in Roland Garros qualifying. They actually played a free setter in Umag in 2022, but I don't think that works at all in the best of 5 format here for an upset. Marozsan beat him in Rome 2 years ago. That could be somewhat difficult. Pachi Pericard, if it's him in the 3rd round, because it honestly could be him, Bergs, Tirante, or Jumhur. If it's him, I guess he would be pretty rough because just, no rhythm, serve bot and everything. And then also Tsitsipas, who Alcaraz owns in the head-to-head, but still, that's probably not the guy you want to play in the 4th round out of the possible options. So the draw isn't that easy for Carlos. Then again, the quarters, he could probably play Ruud or like Paul. Well, Paul he's been struggling against sometimes. Then semis, Musetti, he's already beaten twice this clay season. One of them, Lorenzo was clearly hampered physically in Monte Carlo. One was more normal. If it's Rune in the semis, he lost to him in the Barcelona final, but I guess you would still favor him in the best of 5 sets play, and without physical issues like in Spain. So yeah, Alcaraz Sinner final looks pretty likely. Sinner has pretty easy first 2 rounds, but on the other hand, you could imagine Arthur Fils being more of a bother than like Tsitsipas to Alcaraz, probably. But what I said, I think a few days ago on one of the streams about the Rome final, I think that it's clear that right now, for like the entire world of tennis, really, Sinner and Alcaraz, it's the biggest matchup. There is no other. And it's kind of like good for us to get it just as many times as we can. The dynamics are very interesting. You've got all the story with Yannick dominating the entire tour, but Carlos beating him every single time in the last 2 years. You've got the hype, the excitement, the aesthetic value. I think it's just amazing for the sport if this matchup happens more or less recently. It's also an opportunity for tennis to be marketable for a good reason. and not for another like scandalish thing. So yeah, I think a final between them would be amazing. And we still haven't had a final between two players born in the 21st century at a Grand Slam level. In fact, up until Rome, they didn't even play a final between each other at the ATP 1000 level. Although some other players born in the 2000s did. So obviously Ruud, Draper, and then Alcaraz, Musetti, but not Alcaraz, Sinner. And to have it as a Grand Slam final, that would be something absolutely special. That would be a treat to watch. I think in a way, even though we might all have our favorites, a lot of us will be rooting for that, just to see that. And it looks likely. Last year, they arrived at Roland Garros 80% physical shape, let's say, and they were still dominating everybody. Rome, you could argue that Sinner was maybe even worse than the start of the week, just really needed to shake off the rust, and he just does it so quickly. He will probably be sharper than Rome as well. So if they play in the final, I think last year when they were playing at Roland Garros, I was saying like, it's a 51-49 for me, but I very much know where that 1% lies, and also with Alcaraz. This time would probably be more like a 60-40, of course, depending on what we see during the event as well. But yeah, I mean, that would be something incredible. I actually don't believe that we still, it's kind of incredible. We still haven't had a Grand Slam final between them. Of course, a few Grand Slam meetings though. Wimbledon and in 2022, US Open in 2022, incredible match. 2024 Roland Garros last year, that was like a mini final. Of course, that's a little disrespectful to Zverev. He did lead Alcaraz 2-1 in the final, but like a mini final between them, let's say. But to have it as like the closing moment of the whole event, that would be special. Not so that Marozsan Nardi can beat him. I mean, Marozsan can beat himself, I think, but he's got enough power to just push Luka behind the baseline, not let him play his game. Luka also 0-4 in Grand Slam main draws, like Medjedovic. I guess he's gonna do it at some point. But Marozsan is the favorite, but I think when I saw like odds for that match or something like that, they were pretty crazy in Fabi's favor, and I think that was much. That was too much, but I do think he's the favorite. He would also be more interesting to watch against Alcaraz, I think. I mean, Alcaraz Nardi, there's a good story in there because back in the junior days, Alcaraz, Nardi, Rune, to a lesser extent Medjedovic, to a lesser extent Kodat, that was the 2003 group that was like dominating European events. I'm actually talking like even before, ITF juniors, but like Lepetia and Tennis Europe and stuff like that. So there's always like a pretty big story there. And Alcaraz Nardi, I'm sure you can find photos of them when they were 15, 16, and they were basically growing up together. So I guess the story would be nice, but Marozsan Alcaraz is the more interesting match. So I'd rather watch that. It would be also be more difficult for Carlos, I think. But again, best of 5 play makes it so tricky to upset the favorites. Even if you have an incredible set, which Marozsan can definitely do, you have to keep it up for at least 2 more, and that very often ends up being the deal breaker. So yeah, in terms of the big picture stuff, Alcaraz Sinner final looks very likely. Let's see. I mean, if one of them loses, it's also very likely the other picks up the pieces. I don't remember who it was on the stream the other day, a few days ago. Maybe it was Jake actually, who said that Sinner and Alcaraz, like if one of them doesn't win, he's gonna be shocked. I think it would be pretty major if neither of them wins. Of course, it's now how many? 5 slams in a row that they've won. Well, it's been incredible, and kinda would be like if Alcaraz wins now, then it's gonna be balanced again, 3-3 in the last 6, and also natural surfaces for Carlos, hard courts for Yannick. But I'm definitely not, just saying that Alcaraz has to win this event. But I think if he doesn't, it's probably gonna be Sinner. Other contenders, I mean, Musetti has a nice draw to the semis. It works against him a little bit that he would probably need to beat both guys. I mean, I guess that works for most players. Zverev, if he gets through like Cerundolo, Djokovic, I suppose he's one of the players who can potentially beat Sinner. But after the Australian Open final, it's tough to believe in that, not creating a break point there. That was just such a brutal showing. And contrary to most people, I don't think he actually played that poorly in that final. I think he just played his normal game, and that's how much it was, obsolete in a way. Draper, I mean, I don't think he's a title contender, but to go deep, sure. Djokovic, again, depends on your opinion. Of course, there's going to be a lot of people saying that you cannot underestimate Novak, and many times we've done that and we're wrong. I think he's, again, not really a contender to win this event, especially if you have to go to such great lengths to beat Sinner and Alcaraz back-to-back, for example. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that outside of Sinner and Alcaraz, it's a group of players. That group includes, to me, Zverev, that group includes Djokovic, Draper, Musetti, maybe even Ruud. But a lot of these would need at least some help from the other players, as in like eliminating one of these guys. If somebody takes out Alcaraz, maybe I have a shot. Maybe I can beat Sinner. Maybe if somebody takes out Sinner, maybe I just need to play one good match against Alcaraz and survive. So it's going to be an exciting couple of weeks, but you could also imagine an event that is somewhat like last year, where the first few rounds are fun, and then around the fourth round, quarterfinals, the matches of Sinner and Alcaraz. Yeah, I mean, you just know exactly what's going to happen, and as long as it's building up for the big match, that's good. And last year, I guess it was, so that was fine. But you cannot tell me that you enjoyed the Sinner Dimitrov quarterfinal, for example, right? Or Carlos beating Tsitsipas, or Carlos beating, who was it, Korda, or Aliassime. All of these matches just never hit. They didn't land. Sinner Mute, I guess, was somewhat interesting for a set, right? But basically the situation was that Carlos struggled against Jesper de Jong in the second round, but from the third onwards, his matches until the semis were really not that interesting. And I guess Sinner only had that one match against Mute, where the fact that Corentin outplayed him like that for a set was making us think, oh wow, maybe something is going to happen here. But otherwise, it's not like it was ever that close to somebody doing the damage. So hopefully it's that can be a little bit more exciting this week. Just the build this year, the build up to the big match, if we do get the big match. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I think I've already said my things here. I will never understand why people believe Marozsan poses a potential problem to Carlos. I mean, Marozsan poses a potential problem to anybody. It's not really Carlos specific to me. It's just a guy who can play, his own brand of tennis against anybody if he's feeling confident. Finish the point off in 2-3 shots, throw in the drop shot, which is ridiculous, absolutely. Serve well as well. I mean, I don't think. I'm not really looking at that Rome match 2 years ago. I think it's just a Marozsan specific thing rather than Alcaraz thing. If Marozsan was in the Sinner second round, I'd be saying exact same things. That it's technically dangerous on paper, but best of 5, pulling off 3 unbelievable sets of tennis while playing that super high octane aggressive style, it's difficult. But yeah, I don't think it really changes much for me if it's Alcaraz or if it's Sinner in that case, or any other high seed. Anyway, I think at this we will say goodbye probably. Yeah, hope you still enjoyed that one. For some issues with scheduling, we basically had to do this one like that, so me talking on my own. But yeah, hopefully I was able to do the draw justice. Let's get into Roland Garros. As I said earlier, my winner pick is at the moment Carlos Alcaraz for sure. Ask me again before the final, but yeah, I mean, Alcaraz Sinner, that looks very likely in a couple of weeks' time. Anyway, once more, thank you, and we will see you guys on many different things during the Roland Garros fortnight. I'm actually not sure how much myself I will be available, but probably I'll find some spots just like we were able to find this one. Thank you to Jean, Brenda, Jake, and anybody who is watching this on replay. So I'm gonna play that John Silk outro to you, and
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.